James, I think the last time you and I spoke, and of course you would remember this vividly, was in 1996.
I've been told already. I've been pre-warned that we did a big long chat
We did,
in the
you know,
90 something, 97, 98, something like that.
it was 90, it must have been 96, 97. I'm thinking somewhere in between there, obviously when Breathe was doing the business. But that was the last time. I do think I'd spoken to you before when Chrysalis decided to obviously make some money on your catalog in '93. But yeah, that's kind of the last time we spoke. So I don't know where the hell you've been, but clearly you've been very busy.
I've not been far.
Yeah, but you've been busy. You're
I have
prolific.
been busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's my chosen profession, so there's no point, doing all this work and then sitting back with your feet up, just letting the world go by.
Well, like I could give you a startling number that might upset you or it could make you happy, because obviously the one thing that you've only ever wanted to do was anything creative, anything in the arts, anything to do with music, which you've now made a career of. The scary part is you've been doing it for 55 years.
I'm just working that out in my head. God, you're right. That's
69.
horrific. That's horrible.
Well,
Thank you. That's ruined my day.
you're welcome. But no, moving along swiftly, as a fan of yours growing up as a teenager in the early 80s, I was privy to a lot of the albums that Ultravox certainly released as they were coming out, and collecting them all vehemently. But what I find fascinating about your career is that you had this initial 30-year period, for lack of a better slot of time, where you were popular. You were in the charts, you were on top of the pops, you were doing all of this thing. But really, the balance of your career to now, you've had the benefit that not many artists have, where you've been able to be kind of retrospective and celebrate that work, but into the future, which I find, it, and obviously that music has translated, across generations. But I mean, for someone like you, is it interesting to you as someone who was labeled a pop artist back in the day, and pop by its very definition is of the day, that your body of work lives on 20, 30, in some cases 40 odd years later?
There are probably a series of events that's made that possible. You have to rewind and go back to when you were buying the albums and stuff like that. A piece of music, a successful, commercially successful piece of music, not a successful piece of music, a commercially successful piece of music, would have a shelf life of 6 weeks. You'd make it, you'd put it out. If everyone did their job and you were incredibly lucky, you'd get it on the radio, you'd get top of the pops, it would hang around for a couple of weeks, then it would drop and probably never be seen again, except for the hardcore fans who, obviously go back and visit those things. Um, so there was that. The medium that we had was just radio and television. Television back then, very limited, where music could be performed. Very few programs where you could perform live. You had Top of the Pops, it was miming, it was all of that stuff. We didn't have the internet, we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have 24/7 television or music channels or any of that stuff. None of that existed. So it was a small bite of the cherry when it came to the longevity of music.
Hmm.
And then you get to, as you say, you have like 20, 30 years of kind of riding at the top, doing your stuff. Then all this happens. All of a sudden, this stuff becomes available. Young people don't consume music the same way that we did. They don't buy it for a start. You know, they they find it. They find it on the internet. They find it on a game. They, you know, I did a version of Bowie's "Man Who Sold the World" way back in the early 80s for a pretty dodgy British movie. And and because it was used in a game in the last 10 years or whatever, an entire wealth of young people discovered this piece of music. Now, to them, it's new. There is no difference. They don't know if it's recorded yesterday or 40 years ago. Weirdly, it was recorded 40 years ago. But sonically, things haven't changed that much. So you can hear an old piece of music and still think, wow, this is great. So to the young people, this is a new piece of music. So they then go to send it to their friends via the internet
Mm.
and they put it on lists and do all. Then they look you up and they find a wealth of music that they didn't know existed,
Yeah.
which is great. So the longevity of music that you did back then that you thought would have a 6 week shelf life
Mm.
has gone way, way, way beyond that,
Mm.
to the point where people can't discern what is 40 years old and what I've just released.
Well, that's testament to great production. Let's just put it down to that. If it was badly produced, it would, some songs don't stand up. They don't stand the test of time. I think, even if you cite Vienna from a production point of view, you know, the reason why your catalog, I think, in many, for many reasons, survives is because of the quality and the commitment that everybody made in producing it. But that said, I've come to the conclusion that you clearly thrive on catastrophe and disaster, because if you look at your philanthropic work that you've done for the bulk of your career, that's, you know, give James a good, natural disaster, give him famine, and there he goes. And, whether you're sorting out Montserrat or whether you're sorting out, Live 8 or whatever it may be. But, clearly, um, you're drawn to that and have been, for right up until more recently with, with the lockdown and COVID, and you and Wayne Hussey doing your thing. So what is it about that makes you, do you feel an obligation to do it, or do you do it because it feels right?
I think it's an obligation. I think it's a choice. I remember what it felt like having my first band, Slick, back in the
Mm.
mid 70s. We were an out and out pop band, and I remember what it was like having that I don't know that veneer of success whisked away from you, where you were a has been at 22 or 23, whatever it was. You were washed up, finished. And I was incredibly lucky to be allowed a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance. So I nurture that. I relish that. You know, by rights, Glenn Matlock would never have phoned me up after Slick and asked me to join the Rich Kids. And if I hadn't joined the Rich Kids, I wouldn't have bought a synthesizer. I wouldn't have put Visage together. I would never have joined Ultravox. So I've got to look back at all of that stuff and can I pinch myself and think how lucky I was to be able to do it. So when someone, you know, asks you to do what you do on a daily basis, they're not asking you to come and perform brain surgery or climb Kilimanjaro or whatever. They're not taking you out your comfort zone. They're saying, can you add your name and your bit of following and your little bit of talent to this for this? What is the problem in doing that? It just doesn't seem to make much sense, And I suppose maybe because Bob and I have have experienced things on a personal basis.
Mm.
Going to Ethiopia and at the height of the famine and seeing it and tasting it and smelling it and stuff. There is a change that comes over you, and it's not you're out there trying to save the world. There's a realization that by contributing your little bit, it might help other people contribute a little bit. There's a there's a moment where one person shouting in an empty room doesn't mean anything. You get 100,000 people shouting in a room. People hear it.
Mm.
So you're one of those people. You're one of those contributors. If you don't do it, someone else might not do it. I remember Kate Bush once said she was thinking of giving up music. And I wrote to her and said, for God's sake, don't be ludicrous. If you give it up, I give it up. And then we all walk away from it because dance music seemed to be the thing at the time. You're letting DJs put, clashing bass notes right through all your lovely chord structures. And you think, well, you can't do that. So by stepping up to the plate and doing your little thing can turn into a lot of, maybe something big.
which it's done. But I think, moving it forward to Let's Rock, which stranger to this country. You've spent more time than many have, and you're coming back, which is fantastic. And I was just wondering, obviously you're going to step out on that stage, and you've got multi generations, like we were saying earlier, and they're all there. Some of them are there for a particular song. That some of them are there for you, as a whole. But for you, when you're on that stage, having performed these songs countless times, what does it give you? Because obviously we know that what the audience gets, but what does James get? What does Midge Ure get from that stage?
You get sustenance. That's what it is, like a musical vampire. You need to feed off the audience, and
Yeah.
and on a good night, and I still don't know what a good night is. I can feel it, but I don't know how I make that because the audience make a good night as much as the artist does. And when you've got a good night where everything just gels, there's a feeling like nothing else. And I suppose like some kind of drug, that's what you're trying to achieve every night. Doesn't always work. Sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
audience have a great time and the artist is having a bit crap time, and vice versa.
Sure.
So when it all gels together, that's what you want. I don't want to convert millions of people. It's too late. It's like if like young person finds my music somewhere, they can go back in history, like a little TARDIS, like a little musical time machine. They can go back
Yes.
and gleam all that stuff that I've done over the last, as you
Sorry.
pointed out, 55 years. Um, so I think the big challenge, you know what, for any artist, the big challenge is to get the 50% of the audience who don't really want to be there. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's your challenge. The ones
Yeah.
who only know Breathe or Vienna, and they've only heard it a couple of times and didn't know you sang it. They're the ones that you want walking out at the end of the night going, bloody hell, that was good. I
Yeah.
had no idea. I had no idea he wrote that or he sang that or he did this. And
Yeah.
that
Well, it's
is
a
the
great
challenge.
cover. It's a great cover of Vienna that he did.
Yeah, well, I did it when Breathe became successful, and I know you know the story. It was through Swatch watches.
Yeah.
You know, they picked
You and
up
I sync.
they
You
picked
do
up on
very
the
well at
song
syncing. Yeah.
and used it on a TV commercial. So all of a sudden, people liked the song. They didn't know me, and they didn't know what I looked like. They didn't know how old I was. They didn't know my history. There was no baggage. There was no, you know, legend status to it. I was nothing. I was just a voice on a piece of music, which is maybe the best way that anyone can discover your music, you know. So that happens, and you've got to understand that a lot of your audience, especially in a festival thing, they aren't there to see you. They're there for the event, and you're part of that event. So you have to think, okay, I'm going to play what they'll probably know, and what they don't know, I'll play it the best I possibly can, and that
Mm.
will be just as effective as hearing, Breathe or Vienna.
But I mean, it's interesting because I mean, you play here, you play Johannesburg, I think on the 15th, and then on the 16th, you play in Durban, and then you jet off to, I think your next stop is in Dubai.
Mm.
Um, and, your set list, obviously, you're talking about different geographies, different audience. That must be, it must be quite a challenge, I suppose, to really hone that and get it right.
Well, variations of a set list, I suppose. I wouldn't play Breathe in most places, but I'll probably end up playing Breathe when I come down there. Um, I'm coming with my band Electronica, which is great because that doesn't happen very often that when you do these festivals, you get to do that. For instance, when I go to Dubai, it's a house band.
Mm.
So they know the six songs or something that you get wheeled on for, and you do your six songs, then you get wheeled off again. Whereas I think on this I've got my proper band, so it's a silent stage, so everything you hear is
Mm.
coming direct. There's no amplifiers on stage. The guitar goes through a processor, and the bass goes through processors, and it's electronic drums, and so sonically it should be fantastic.
Okay.
That is easy to kind of say, okay, we're dropping those and we're doing this instead. That's
Yeah.
not a problem. But the house band is a whole different ballgame. You know, they're the guys playing for half a dozen artists, and they haven't got the time to go and
Uh,
relearn something on the day, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Last question, because I know your time is at a premium, sir. A pinnacle point for you. I mean, you've got at least another 55 years in you, but as far as your personal pinnacle point has been, because of course, Chrysalis was calling your greatest hits back in the 90s. That clearly wasn't true, because you've made a number of greatest hits subsequent to that. But a pinnacle point for you in your career that really, is there one that stands out for you that was a defining moment that you cherish?
Yeah, the moment I joined Ultravox, um, for a variety of reasons. Prior to joining Ultravox, and it's weird, I'm still tarred with the same brush. You still get journalists who go, "Oh yeah, you're that guy from Slick." Not you're the guy who saved
No.
thousands of lives with Band-Aid, So you still get that. So for me, after the experience of Slick, where I was doing music that I didn't particularly care for, and you're tarred by that particular brush, I vowed never to allow that to happen again. So the moment I joined Ultravox, it was against all odds. It was a broken band. They'd been dropped by the record label. They owed the record label a fortune. They had no manager. They had nothing. They had no future until the moment I plugged in my guitar and my keyboard and we played some music together. And it was the most astounding thing ever. And that was a seismic shift for me.
Mm,
I'd
mm,
found a band where I could experiment, where I could shake off the shackles of the
mm,
pop stardom and get down and get dirty. And that to me, much more so than all the other accolades and highlights, Live Aid, the OBE, and all of that stuff that people would think were the big moments. The big moments are the ones that people don't see. You know,
mm.
doing a duet with Kate Bush, playing guitar one on one with Eric Clapton.
Oh, yeah.
They're schoolboy dreams
Yeah.
and they happen to me, and I've got to pinch myself at times and think, yeah, I'm still a
Mm,
fan. I'm a
mm,
fan. You don't get into music unless you're a fan of somebody else. So for those moments, the pinch me moments, you know, uh, you're standing there thinking, I'm sitting here having a conversation with Paul McCartney. It's ludicrous, that was never on the radar,
mm.
but those things happen.